The way that you arrange lights in a scene depends upon the type of lights that you select. If you choose to use photometric lights, then that presupposes that you'll be using the radiosity renderer or mental ray. If you go this route, you can create a very accurate lighting simulation. And the arrangement of the lights is relatively trivial because you'll be placing the lights exactly where they go in the real world. Use photometric luminaires in a building interior, and use the sunlight system to simulate the sun and the sky. If you decide instead to use standard lights, then that presupposes that you're using the scanline renderer and ray tracing. And the advantage of this method is it's often much quicker to render than other methods. But it does require more of a strategy for lighting than photometric lights do. And that's because standard lights aren't really real. You have a lot more flexibility in where you place them, how you attenuate them, and so on. To get started with this, I recommend putting in the default lights into the scene. Do that up on the Views menu. Add default lights to scene. And you have a choice to add the key and or the fill light. We'll add them both, and then press Z to zoom extents all. Notice that there are two lights that have been added to the scene. They're staggered in the back viewport and in the top viewport. They are staggered because they are omni lights, and they would wash each other out if they were lined up in any plane. Okay. So let's take a look at what these lights are doing for us. The default lights have been turned off, and then they've been added as actual objects into the scene so that we can manipulate them. It also reveals the strategy that they're using in the viewport to illuminate the geometry. This is the fill light. It's below the room at some distance, staggered away from the building. I'm going to turn it off temporarily and zoom in over here in perspective. Notice that some of the surfaces in the model now are completely dark, namely these walls and the ceiling. These other walls and the floor look pretty good. That's because they're being illuminated by the omni light that is above them over here. This exposes a fact about the scanline rendering and standard lights, and that is that the standard lights only illuminate the surfaces that they directly hit. The light energy does not bounce around the scene at all. That's why these surfaces are dark, because the illumination in this scene is coming completely from this omni light. That's why it's necessary to have a fill light below the scene in order to illuminate the ceiling and some of the walls. So the first strategy is to put in two staggered omni lights like this to provide general illumination. Some people prefer to add 6 direct lights to the scene on the faces of a cube. This is an equivalent strategy. The problem is you don't want the lights to ever line up with each other, or you'll have bright spots in your image. Now this is creating some even lighting, but it's very boring because there's no variation. That's where spotlights come in. And I showed you in previous videos how you can add spotlights into an interior and create variable intensity using hot spot and fall off, as well as near and far attenuation. The spotlights really are used to create interest in the lighting and create variation in the scene. If you find that you have too much light overall in the scene, what you can do is take the multipliers down on your Omni lights. Just decrease them, maybe to 0.5 or 0.25, and that will lower the overall lighting level in the scene. And as you add additional spotlights, that will bring the general lighting level up. So it's really a balance that you have to strike between your omnis and your spots to create an overall mood for the scene. So hopefully these are some strategies you can use if you plan to use the Scanline renderer in your work.